You know that feeling when you wake up in the morning, stare at the ceiling, and realize you're just a tiny, insignificant cog in a giant, soulless system. You go to work, shuffle papers, follow stupid rules, and feel like if you disappeared tomorrow, the machine wouldn't even hiccup. It would just plug someone else into your spot. We all feel that way sometimes. But for one man, this feeling wasn't just a fleeting moment of sadness. It was his entire life. And out of that life, he forged a nightmare we still can't forget. We're used to thinking of Franz Kafka as this brooding literary genius, sitting in a Prague cafe, dreaming up his bizarre worlds. But the reality was far more mundane and far more terrifying. Kafka was a deeply miserable office clerk. He worked at the Workers' Accident Insurance Institute. Every single day, year in and year out, he read dry bureaucratic reports about someone's fingers getting torn off at a factory, or someone's leg getting crushed by a machine. And his job was to assess these tragedies using the language of bureaucracy. He watched as real, raw human pain was turned into a stamped piece of paper. He saw the system grind people up and spit them out, leaving nothing but a number in a cardboard folder. But if you think this bureaucratic hell ended when his shift was over, you'd be wrong. Because after work, Franz went home to a deeply personal hell: his father. Hermann Kafka could be summed up in one word: a tyrant. He was a massive, loud, successful businessman who had clawed his way up from the bottom and genuinely believed the whole world should dance to his tune. And this man ends up with a son who is a skinny, quiet, sickly boy who flinches at loud noises. His father didn't just misunderstand Franz, he despised him, and methodically, day by day, emotionally destroyed him. Any interest his son had was mocked. Every word was met with harsh, absolute criticism. This primal, panicked fear of his father became hardwired into Kafka. He grew up with the absolute, unshakable conviction that he was a nobody, a freak, a failure, someone who did everything wrong and was, by default, guilty of everything. And that deep-seated guilt before a higher, untouchable authority would eventually run like a red thread through all of his books. So how do you survive when you're being eaten alive by a senseless system by day and your own father by night? For Franz, his only salvation was the night. When the whole house fell asleep, he'd sit at his desk and write. It was his escape, his therapy, his only way to breathe in a suffocating world. You've probably heard of his most famous novella, The Metamorphosis. It's the story of an ordinary guy, Gregor Samsa, who wakes up one morning to find he's transformed into a giant, hideous insect. A lot of literary critics are still digging around for deep philosophical metaphors in it. But the truth is, Kafka wasn't making things up. He was literally describing his own life. He was that insect in his own family, a strange, incomprehensible creature who only disappointed everyone, irritated his father, and who everyone just wanted to sweep out of sight as quickly as possible. His work wasn't sci-fi or surrealism. It was the ruthless realism of how he felt every single day. Kafka was a perfectionist and his own harshest critic. He barely finished anything because he genuinely believed his writing was worthless garbage. And then a real, physical tragedy struck. At 34, he started coughing up blood. The diagnosis? Tuberculosis. In the early 20th century, this was a slow, agonizing death sentence. The disease drained him for several years. By the time he was 40, the pain in his throat was so unbearable he couldn't even speak or swallow food. He was dying of starvation in a hospital bed. And so, realizing the end was near, Kafka turned to his only truly close friend, Max Brod. He handed over all his diaries, sketches, and unfinished novels, everything that gave his life meaning during those lonely nights. And Kafka made Max swear an oath. He asked for just one thing. "Max, everything I leave behind must be burned unread. Every last page." He just wanted to disappear, to erase himself from a world where he never quite fit in. And this is where the greatest betrayal in literary history happens, a great betrayal in the name of art. Max Brod broke his vow. He didn't burn a thing. In fact, he spent years piecing together those scattered papers, deciphering his dead friend's nervous handwriting, and getting them published. And when those books finally came out, the world was shaken. People read the trial, they read the castle, and realized with horror that this quiet, downtrodden clerk from Prague had somehow completely predicted the nightmare of the coming 20th century. He predicted totalitarian regimes, faceless courts, and systems where a human being means absolutely nothing. Today, nearly every language has a term for Kafkaesque absurdity. We use it when we run into an impenetrable, pointless bureaucracy, a system with no logic and no humanity, just an endless, maddening corridor. And therein lies the greatest, most bitter irony of all. The man who spent his entire life thinking he was an absolute zero. The man who was terrified of living and begged to have every trace of his existence wiped away, became the defining voice of an entire century.